I am honored to welcome Joseph Massaro to our podcast, Heirloom Conversations. Joseph has a long career that has combined business with building and perseverance. And while many people know him as someone who bought an island, I'm excited to learn more about the man behind the island and the business today. Joseph, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I always start with one question, and I think it gets to the heart of many of us. What was your childhood like?
I actually had a good childhood. I was a happy kid. I came up with an Italian family. My mother was at home. My biggest problem was schooling. I was not very good in school. My brother is 3 years older than me, born on the same day, June 27th. He was the smartest kid in the class, and I was the dumbest kid in the class. So I loved everything about life except for school. By the fifth grade, I had to go to summer school every year just to advance. It's found out later that I do have a learning disability, but we didn't know it at the time. And I felt sorry for my mother. She had one smart kid and one not too smart. I grew up about 30 miles north of New York City, a small town called Elmsford, New York. My father had a service station, and like I said, my mother was at home all the time.
Do you recall certain values that your parents taught you when you were young that you still hold on to today?
Well, we had freedom back then. It was great. I mean, as a boy, you could do what you want as long as you were home for dinner, to have dinner with your father. My mother was the disciplinarian, so my father wasn't. But both my brother and I knew if my father said something, we listened. My father never raised his voice to us kids. But we knew that, he didn't have to.
Are you still close with your folks?
My father passed away at 59, and my mother, she lived into her 80s, and she was my best friend.
Do you think that you had any kind of entrepreneurial spirit as a kid?
Absolutely not. I thought I was a lazy kid. Actually, wasn't lazy though. I did a little, like I had paper routes. I cut grass. I went and caddied on Saturdays at 14 years old. I'd have to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't go. They wouldn't put me out till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon because I was just a young boy. And I remember carrying 18 holes for $4 back then.
So it sounds like there was a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit then.
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah. But I always thought I was a little lazy back then. Yes.
What do you think you learned from those experiences that may have led you to where you are today?
Well, I think what happened was, I had no confidence in myself because, like I said, I was really bad in school, and I went 8 years with the nurses, the nuns, in the Catholic school. And when I hit second grade, the second grade teacher said to me, "Are you going to be as smart as your brother?" I knew it was downhill from there. There's no way I was going to be. And somehow I ended up going to an all-boys high school, which I hated. And after 2 years, they said that you have a choice. You can either quit or we're throwing you out because your grades are not good enough. So I left there and I went to a public school. And I think that's when I started to learn something. When I went to that school, the guidance counselor said to me, "You need to take English and math and whatever else you want to take. Here's a list." And I looked at the list. Shop class. I loved it. I took a shop class. Drafting class. I took a drafting class. Driver's education. So I could get my senior driver's license at 17 instead of 18. And then I took auto body and fender work. My mother always said that if I ever got an A at school, she'd give me $100, right? And when I started auto body and fender, working with my hands, I knew what I wanted to do. And I got an A, but I never got the $100 from her on the auto body and fender. But I'd come home with my report card, and of course my brother gets his report card at the same time when we were in the same school. And my mother said, "Where's your report card?" "Oh, I must have left it on the bus. I didn't want her to see it." My report card was the most colorful one because back then when you failed the class, they put it in red. There was a lot of red on my report card. And I felt so sorry for my mother. She'd work with me every night trying to get me to do my spelling words. So one night, I said to Mom, "I want to do my spelling words in the living room." I wrote out all the spelling words on a piece of paper. I ripped them into little pieces, and I laid them at the bottom of the coffee table, and I stuck them to the bottom of the coffee table. When she'd ask me the spelling words, I'd be able to spell it because I was laying on the floor under the coffee table. So when I came back home from school that day, and I had a like a 55 on my test. She said to me, Joseph, something's wrong. You knew every word last night. Are you sure there's nothing you want to tell me? What's that, Ma? I found all these little pieces of paper on the floor this morning.
So she discovered what you tried to hide.
Exactly.
It sounds like you found early on that your skills were more in the mechanics and actual trades than focusing on typical academia.
Yeah, I was good with my hands. When I was 16, my friend and I built a race car together, and all I really wanted to do was get out of school and go to work for my father in his gas station. I worked for him sometimes on the weekend. After school, I'd work for him. I went to work for my father for the first 6 months after high school, and I found out I didn't like it. I was kind of boring there. And my uncle had a construction company. He was a sheet metal contractor. And he'd come in every once in a while with his big car and fill him up with gas, and he'd say to me, why don't you come to work for me? And I'm not going to leave my father. How am I going to do that? One day I had to take the truck back to his place. He said, come in, I want to show you something. He takes me into the shop. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon. And he says to me, what time do you get off? I said, about 6:30. He said, look, you're covered with grease. Do you see these guys working here? They get off in 15 minutes. Look at them, they're clean. I still, to this day, don't know how I left my father because I had a great relationship with him. But I think he wanted me out of that business too. Then I became an apprentice, and I fell in love with that kind of work. I'm working out in the field with people and doing different things.
Why do you think it was that you wanted to work for your dad?
After school, I went to work. I could work on cars. I mean, I could take an engine apart. I built a race car. Cars were my life at that point in time. I met my girlfriend when I was in that high school. I was 15 and a half years old. We got married at 21. She was a hairdresser in the same town I was. And when we got married, we couldn't afford a house down there, so we moved up to the country up here in Mayapack. We bought a house at 21. We both saved our money when we were dating. So we had enough for the down payment. But we had to eat at my mother's house for the next 6 months because we didn't have any money after we made the down payment on the house.
Who do you think was a major influence on you when you were younger?
When I went to work for my uncle in the field, there was an old Polish union sheet metal worker. And for some reason, he took me under his wing. Usually when you're an apprentice, you just do what they tell you. You just do whatever they tell you. Well, him and I worked on the job together alone, and I actually ended up doing a lot of stuff with him. He let me do anything I wanted. He wanted to do this, do that. And I worked with him for a couple of years, okay, in the field. And I loved everything about that, except for we worked outside in the winter. They didn't heat the buildings back then. It was cold working out there. But you had freedom. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. And one day we were doing another big school up here where I live now, actually. And my uncle came to the job site, and he said to the guy, Pete, he says, I'm taking Joe from you. And he said, you're not taking Joe from me. You finally gave me a good kid, and now you're going to take him from me? He quit. He quit the job. And then my uncle said, no, I'm not taking Joe to give to another guy. I have plans for Joe. So I went to work, and then I went to work in the shop, which I wasn't really thrilled. I really loved the outside. My goal was to become a job foreman at some point. So I went to work in the shop. Now, I see things differently than other people. I think it's because of my dyslexia. I see things differently than other people. So when I'm working in the shop, we're working on a big press break. The shop foreman, his name was Slim, he was a big guy, and me, I'm just holding the dumb end of the piece of metal that we're bending, right? And we're making these clips that we need. And as we went through it, we had to make a die change to get this thing done. We had to make 3 or 4 die changes to make this product. And after a couple hours of me doing this, I said to him, Slim, I think we could save 1 die change. That was a big mistake. He says to me, I've been doing this for 20 years, kid. You've been in this shop for 3 days. You think you know more than I do. Get over there and just hold the stupid end of this metal. All right, I just shut up and went over there. 15 minutes later, he says to me, how? And I said, well, if we do bend 3 and 6 first, you don't have to do the extra die change. And the next thing he said was, Jesus, you're right. I see certain things. So from the shop, I learned, I became a layout man. I did everything there was in the shop. So I ended up moving into the drafting department as a young boy now. And I see things that are wrong in the drafting department, just silly little things. For instance, I see these guys are sharpening their pencil on this machine. The next day I came in with a mechanical pencil. that you didn't have to sharpen, just push the button. Next thing, everybody's got a mechanical pencil. You know, with sheet metal, once you make the drawings, then you have to break them up into little pieces and send it to the shop.
Right.
They would actually draw the fittings using compasses and everything that they wanted made, put all the information on it, and that would be a ticket. I came up with pre-printed tickets. You didn't have to make the drawing anymore. You know, things like that. And I really fell in love with that. That was my dream job, to become a draftsman. I had everything I wanted there. I had a great job, you know. I had a nice house, I had a wife. I worked from 6 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, half a day on Saturday. You know, I'd go hunting, fishing with the guys. It was great.
At what point did you realize you weren't going to work for someone else forever?
So I'm about 23 years old now. And all of a sudden I get a classification of 1A. I'm married, I got a house, a wife. I get a classification of 1A. This is during the height of the Vietnam War, right? Well, I don't hear anything for 2 years, something like that. And one day, I opened the mailbox, and I got a draft notice in the mailbox. Report to Whitehall Street for immediate induction. I'm going in the Army, you know. So that morning I got up. I took a train to New York City and went to Whitehall Street. Induction into the Army. I'm going to Vietnam, there's no doubt. That's where I'm headed. So the next day, I'm in line for a haircut, right? And I hear my name mentioned, Massaro. And I said, here. They take me, they put me in a little room by myself. The guy calls me out, and there's a lieutenant sitting there. And he says to me, who's your father, Senator Fulbright? He says, I got more calls about you than anybody on this base. I said, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I was told to report here. He says, it seems, though, the day you left, there was a postponement of induction that came in the mail. I said, what does that mean? He says, it probably means that they screwed up the paperwork and that you're coming back anyway. But there's a general from New York National Guard wants to talk to you. I pick up the phone, and it's some general from New York National Guard. And he said to me, look, they messed up your paperwork. You shouldn't have had to go at that point in time. I said, what general? Is it just a paperwork screw up? Because I said goodbye to everybody. They gave me a party. They gave me money to leave, you know. If it's just a paper screw up and I got to come back here, I might as well stay, right? And he says to me, you know, son, I can't tell you what to do. All I can tell you is what I do. What's that, General? So I get my ass out as fast as I could. I go home, and I have orders to go to Whitehall Street the next day, right back to Whitehall Street. But I heard that there was an opening in the National Guard. Now, that was unheard of because everybody was jumping in the National Guard not to go to Vietnam. So I decided to go take the test. I knew that if you have a draft notice, you can't join something else. That's the rule. But I went anyway. I don't know why I decided to go, but I went anyway. When I got to the door, there was a woman there. And she said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm Joe Massaro. And she looked at me and she said, you're Joe Massaro? I got more trouble over you than anybody else. She said, you knew you had a postponement induction, and you got on that train anyway. No, I didn't. I had no idea. My wife didn't get it till I was already gone, you know. I said, that's not true. And she yelled at me. So I said to her, look, I got accepted into National Guard. And she looked at me and she said, you willing to do 6 years in the National Guard? I said, yeah. She looked at me and said, you know what? You're such a pain in my butt. I'm going to release you and let you go in the Guard. How lucky is that? I'm a pretty lucky guy, I got to tell you. I went in the National Guard. I moved up in the ranks. I had my own squad of 20 guys. The last year of the Guard, instead of going away for 2 weeks summer camp, I went to non-commissioned officer training school in the town that I worked in Peekskill. So there I am in the training, right? And my cousin gets a hold of me. He says, you have to call my Uncle Vincent, something very important. So I called him up. I said, what's going on? He says, I just fired the general manager. I said, you fired Pete? Why'd you fire Pete? We bid a job, and I was away, and he cut the job without asking me. He's going, you're my general manager. I said, no, I'm not. I don't want the job. Don't do anything to get out of the Army here. You're crazy. I'm not management. I'm no manager. I'm a sheet metal worker. I know nothing about it. I have no education or nothing. Don't do anything. Promise me you won't do anything. I'll be out of here in 3 days. I'll come in 3 days, but don't do anything. Okay, he says. So when I walked in that office 3 days later, Pete's sisters worked for him, right? When I walked in the door, they had daggers in their eyes. I knew something happened. He already had fired Pete. So I went in his office. I said, I'm not taking the job. He said, of course you are. I said, I quit. I'm not taking this job. I have no skills. I can't even write a friggin' letter. You want me to take this job? You're crazy. I've been working for these guys all these years. Now they're going to work for me? That's never going to happen. I'm only about 24 years old. No way am I taking this job. I said, what you do is Pete didn't leave yet. I said, we'll go in there and tell Pete he's still manager. If you want to train me down the road, train me down the road, but I'm not taking Pete's job. So he agreed. So I went in and told Pete that. Well, of course, being young and naive, what did I know? Pete couldn't stay there. Of course he quit, right? So that night, I put my name on Pete's door. And my uncle walks around the corner and said, well, you don't waste no time. I said, I got no choice now. And that night, I'm all by myself in that place, right? And I write out a list of what it would take for me to be the manager, all the skills I need, negotiations, letter writing, I mean, the list was 20 long, and I didn't have one of them skills. I mean, I said, I want to know what happened to you. How could you put me in charge here? So that was it. I ended up there. So we have to bid. We're bidding a job, the first job my uncle and I are working together. And it came up to $79,000, the job, right? He says, now I'm going to go away, negotiate this job, which I never negotiated a job before. And he said, do not go below $75,000, right? So I negotiate the job. Vincent comes back a couple of days later, and he sits across the desk from me. He said, did we get the job? I said, yep. He said, what'd you get, 79? I said, no. What'd you get? 77? I said, no. What'd you get? 75? I said, no. He said, damn it, I told you don't go below 75. I said, I got $101,000. He says, jokes are funny. I know you're always making a joke. This is the wrong time to make a joke. So I took the purchase order out and I slid it across the desk to him. He never questioned me again after that. It was a skill I had was negotiations, I was good at it. And I just kept working up. It was a tough business, Contracting is a very difficult business. You got to try to collect your money. Tough business. I loved it. I did love it. It was a love-hate thing, but I did love it.
What do you think it was that your uncle saw in you?
I made these changes in the drafting department. He saw them, things like that. So the first thing I did, so when I took over, I said, we just ended up taking this big job that the guy dropped the number on. It was the largest job we ever took. They bid it at $1 million, and he took it for $925,000. Dropped $75,000, and it's going to be very difficult to make money at that number, And it was an IBM job. It was our first $1 million job we bid, so it was a big deal. So now I'm in charge of this job. I'm in charge of everything. One day I'm working for them, the next day they work for me. And I said, the shop's going to be shocked. Everybody in this place is going to wonder what's wrong with you. They could put you away for this, really, So I took over that job. The guy that ran all the work for IBM, for some reason, he took a liking to me on this job. And we completed the job on time. And from that time on, I did most of IBM's work. So
Where
now,
do you think you picked up your negotiation skills?
my mother was a negotiator. She really was. My mother was so sharp. She had a great humor, quick to tell a joke. She made you laugh, yeah. It was so nice to see her towards the end when I'd go with her and say, Ma, look what your stupid son did. I show her a contract for $400,000, My brother and I, we were definitely not close. We were 3 years apart, He was so smart. He invented the floppy disk, my brother. And we were not close. Of course, he was away to college most of the time anyway. But even when we went out there, we weren't close. Now I can't get rid of him, He's my best friend. He said to me one day, I'm out having dinner with him a couple of years ago. He said, I didn't know you were so funny. I said, you didn't talk to me for friggin' 50 years. How would you know?
Why do you think your relationship has changed over the years?
I don't know. I mean, we just really bound together. He lives in California. I live in New York. But I don't know. He saw me in a different light. He'll tell me, I'm your dumb brother. Yeah, you're really a dumb brother. You got more money than I got now. He says, So when I became his partner, I said, 2 things I need here. First of all, you have no job costing here. Everything's off the cuff. So I want to buy a computer that will do payroll and give us job costing. And I want to buy another machine because of this IBM job to get it done. He agreed to it. So I bought the computer, and we got payroll up and running and job costing, and I bought this machine. Now, when I go out in the shop, they got the machine up and running. Every machine that came in there, I would learn how to run and install it with the installers. I'm a hands-on guy. So I go in the shop, the machine's running, and there's 2 guys on the machine. I said, why do you have 2 guys run this machine? It says the machine's so fast we can't write the information that we need to write on the ductwork. All right, well, let me think about that. Now, I took geometry 3 times because I couldn't pass geometry in high school, right? Well, I wrote this little program. It was all geometry. And once I laid it out the way I saw it, I understood geometry, you know? So I wrote this program that would produce a label for the ductwork instead of these guys writing on it. All the labels came out in order, and they just slapped the label on, okay? So that took care of that problem. Then I realized that, well, I can take this further. Instead of that, I had my foreman doing all the math on this, how to make these fittings. The computer did the math and gave him all the information. Then what I did is I color-coded the labels because we might have 6 jobs running through the shop at the same time. So to get the right car, the right job to the, do you have to go somewhere? Oh. To get the right piece to the right job, I color-coded the labels. So the red job went there, the green job went there. And then I took the, it used to run the labels out in a continuous line. I drew 2 holes in that thing and I put magic markers in it so I could put stripes on it. So not only does it go to the job, but it goes to the second floor in the corner. So, distribution was like 30% of the job. So nobody could touch this. I was computerized by 1976.
Wow. And I bet that you doing that brought the company so much farther along, just
Absolutely.
having that infrastructure and that efficiency.
My competitors couldn't touch me when I got
Right.
college. Then we went even further. Then I developed a CAD system so we can actually draw with computers instead of pen and pencil. And then I came up, I took that labeling program. So I have the labeling program right now, and I started another company called East Coast Fabrication. I started another company and I hired salesmen to go out and sell this new product, a labeling product, right? It was, my industry was starved for innovations. Everything was done by hand. And I hired the salesman who sold me my computer because we couldn't get that computer working for 2 weeks. And I said, anybody can sell me a computer that doesn't work, is a good salesman. So I hired him, And we got this thing up and running. I was really doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden, somebody came up with a system that not only gives you a label, but it actually lays out the ductwork for you. And my salesman, we're done. You're not going to sell labeling programs when this machine can. So what happens is, I guess I'm home for something, I don't know. And my salesman calls me up, and he said, I just got a call from Union Carbide. Do you know the battery people? I said, yeah, what do they want? They said they saw your label in one of their buildings, and they want to know if you can take that labeling program and drive their cutting machine that makes ductwork. I said, what did you tell them? He said, I told them that you'll be back in the office Tuesday. Call them back and tell them I'll be in Indianapolis on Tuesday. Right? So I say to my salesman, look, I don't have a product or anything, but I got an opportunity. So I said to my, look, if we could get $5,000 for this product, it's a home run. We don't know what the product is yet, but let's go to this meeting. So we go down to this meeting, and it turns out that these people were working with another company that were going to buy their machines and connect their software to it. But when they got down, after they proved it out, they screwed them, right? They bought their machines for somebody else, and these guys are mad. So they said to us, look, this machine was selling for $120,000. We want to bring the number in at $69,000. So these guys are in suits now. I'm not a suit guy. I'm at the meeting. I am dressed in a suit today, but I'm there with my 2 salesmen. And we're looking for $5,000 for this program. So they start writing on the blackboard all the numbers that it's going to take to get this to $69,000. Cost of machine, cost of this, cost of that, marketing, boom, 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 boom. As they're putting the numbers on the table, I'm counting them in my head. When they get down the bottom, they draw a line. They say to me, how much is your software going to cost? And I said, $15,000. And he put $15,000 in the bottom, and he drew that line across, and it came up to $69,000. Right? I had it up in my head. So instead of getting $5,000, I'm getting $15,000 for my program now. We came up and we developed this program with no knowledge of how to do it. It's when the first IBM came out, the personal IBM computer. I was in negotiations with the union to sell them the company, $20 million. And the president of the international union is a good friend of mine. So we had the deal working, but their union merged with another union just before we did this thing. And that deal fell apart, you know. So I ended up selling that company with my son-in-law. He was my partner. My son-in-law became my partner in the CAD business. So we ended up selling that business too. So now I buy the company from my uncle in 1990. And actually, the company almost overnight from being a subcontractor to a prime contractor. So I came up with an idea that all of a sudden the air side is bigger than the mechanical side. So I went to IBM. I said, look, you guys are spending a lot of money by making me a subcontractor. I should be a prime air contractor. And that's the way we went. We became a prime. So my business almost doubled overnight. So now I'm up to about 300 guys working for me.
Great.
I'm doing almost every IBM job there is. The General Motors in Tarrytown, I'm their favorite contractor, you know. And I say to myself, it might be a good time to get some of my chips off the table. Maybe I could sell this company and run it, and, you know, and all these guys are consolidating now. It's 2000, you know, they're all consolidating. So I go out to the marketplace, and who comes out of the woodwork but Pennsylvania Power and Light? They want to buy my company. I turned their first offer down. The first offer was like $8 million, and I turned it down. They came back with $8.5 million. So I'm in negotiation with them. And what happens? They call me up, and my guy calls me and says, we have a major problem. I said, what's the problem? I have to come down and talk to you. So he comes down, he sits down across from me, he says, they don't want you. What do you mean they don't want me? They don't think you're corporate material. What the hell does that mean? It means they buy your company and you're out of here. You know, I can't do that. I was born in this company. I graduated high school after my mother wrote my last book report. All I know is this company. He says, that's the only way they're going to do it. So I gave it some thought. I brought all my friends to work with me, right? And when am I ever going to get an offer like that? I'm never going to get an offer like that. So I took the offer. So I bought an SL 500 Mercedes convertible, and I drove to my townhouse in Florida on the back roads all by myself. I sat on the beach for 2 weeks reading books. How many books are you going to read? I need to go back to work. So I had that software company still then, so I bought another building 30 miles north of my old one, and I duplicated my office, the same desk, the same pictures on the wall, and I hired my daughter for the first time. She worked for me about 5 times. Like fire, she'd quit sometimes, you know, and she came to work for me up there. And I lasted about 2 months. I couldn't stand it. It wasn't enough business for me. But that's when I decided to build this house. I'm going to have to tell you how I ended up with this island. You know, this is Petra Island.
Right. How did we get there? How did we get to Petra Island?
Okay, so let me tell you how we got to Petra Island. So we live up in Mayorpack, and I used to water ski on this lake when I was 16 years old. My friend had a boat there, and I fell in love with this lake. So I always knew I wanted to build on this lake. So I'd go out and look for property. It was out of my range. And one year I found a piece of property that was donated to the synagogue, and it was in my price range. So I bought that, and I built my house there in 1980, okay? Years later, my wife and I bought another house, excuse me, to renovate and flip for profit because I wanted to do the renovations. And when I finished the renovation, the market fell apart, and I'm stuck with this house. Now I got to have renters in there. And one of my renters was Kid Creole and the Coconutters. The problem was he's all over Europe, and to get my rent from him was almost impossible, but I hated being a landlord, okay? Now, I came out to Petra Island. That's Petra Island here. I have a friend of mine who knew the people who were here, out here. So it came out one time when they talked about they were going to raise money to build a house, which I didn't know anything about this house, but they were going to raise money to build this house. And when I came to that meeting, I came out with my wife, I knew right away it was nothing but a scam. You're not going to see anything but your money disappear. So I forgot about it. Well, excuse me. I heard that winter that the owner of the island was in financial trouble. And my mind says to me, maybe I can get rid of this house that I can't sell. Maybe I can trade this house and some cash for the island. Is that a crazy thinking? So that spring I came back and I wrote out a little saying, I'm interested in buying your island. I put it in a plastic sandwich bag and I taped it to the fence down here where the dock is because there's no mailbox here. So the note's there. A week goes by, I don't hear anything. I know the note's still there. 2 weeks go by, I don't hear anything. On the third week, I see a guy standing on the dock. I pull my wave runner over, I start talking to the guy. Turns out that the guy was from North Korea. He was a North Korean soldier who got a message from God and walked out of North Korea through 7 checkpoints. It was never stopped, and opened a tofu factory in California. Somehow, the people that own this island that I came out to that lunch with roped this guy into investing. He invested so much money they ended up walking away from the island. All this guy wants to do is go back and make tofu, right? And all I want to do is get rid of that house. So I said to him, look, I have a house on the mainland. Maybe you'd be interested in taking that and some cash for your island. And he said, surprisingly enough, I might be interested. I said to him, would you like to see the house tomorrow? He said, no, I'm going back to California. I said, would you like to see it now? He said, yeah. Well, I'm not going to put him on my wavelength. So let me go home and get my boat. I'll come pick you up. So I go home, I go up to the kitchen, I say to my wife, get on the boat. We're going to go buy an island. She just gets on the boat. She knows I'm nuts. We pick him up. I go to the house. We're going through the house. And he's complaining about everything. And my wife whispers, he doesn't like it. And I say to her, he's already negotiating. That's what he's doing, right? When we got back on the boat, we didn't have a piece of paper or a pencil to exchange telephone numbers. No cell phone back then, right? This is around 95. I said, well, go back to my house. My wife will get us what we need. By the time she came down, I bought the island. I traded the house and some cash, and I ended up with the island. I left her there, dropped Mr. Parks off here. I'm driving back by myself. I said, what did I do? I just bought a friggin' island. What am I going to do with an island? But I fell in love with it. I didn't know much about Franklin, right? I fell in love with it. And I always said I had no interest in building this big house because of 3 problems. One is the amount of time that I would need if I was going to take this project on. I'd have to be here for the entire building. 2, money. I'm doing good, but I don't have enough money to build the house. And 3, the town would not let the original owner build the house. They would never give him the building permit. At that time, it was a 30-foot setback to build anything on this lake. Now, it's a 100-foot setback. What's the chances of me getting all that stuff? So when I sold the company, guess what? I have all the time in the world, right? 2, I got all the money in the world. All I got to do is get over the next hurdle, right? Well, I got a lot of friends in the town, so I did some backdooring, politicking, and seeing if they think they let me build this house. And the guy came back. He said, you have 2 major problems. I said, what are they? The police and the fire will not sign off on this project. Anything I can do? He said, yeah. Take them out of play. Take the whole town out of play. How? Hold the whole town harmless. That's all they're worried about, is getting sued. So I did that. So I ended up getting that building and building this house.
Wow.
Was,
And what made you want to buy the island?
who wouldn't want to own an island? I really wanted to build a house, right? That's what I really wanted to do. And the other thing is, now I have an island, and I got 300 guys I don't have any 5 minutes of peace. I come to the island, nobody can bother me. There's no cell phone. I spend my Saturdays out here, my Sundays, they can't get a hold of me. And who doesn't want to own an island?
And your goal in building the house, was it to preserve the original design?
When I took this project on, I'm not a detail guy because part of my DNA is not detail, but when I come on this island, I'm a detail guy for some reason. My goal, I felt that this is a chance, this could be his masterpiece, right? I get a chance to build Franklin Wright's masterpiece on my island. I got all the money and all the time in the world. So, look, all the stars had to be lined up for me to do this. I was 3 years old when he designed the house. He knew right back then I was going to build this house. 3 years old. So now, I didn't think I'd get the paperwork. I thought I'd get stopped somewhere along the line. But sure enough, at the end, I got a building permit. Now I got to build the house. That's another whole game, right? So I go out, I asked 3 of these big contractors I've been working with in the area if they wanted to bid the house. They said they'd bid the house. When the bids came in, they were ridiculous. You can't put a price on this thing, built on an island, So my marina guy calls me up. He said, how'd you make out with the bids? I said, terrible. They're useless. He said, Joe, when you go play golf in the morning, across the street from the entrance to your golf course, there's a big house being built there. Did you see that house? I said, yeah. Did you ever see the workers shaping up in the morning to go to work? I said, I have. Did you ever see the woman with them? I said, yeah, I noticed the woman. He says, her name is Lydia. She's an aeronautical engineer from Poland, building houses in Mayapack. He said, Joe, this is the smartest woman I ever met. If you need the island moved 4 foot to the left, she'll move it. Next day I get up, I roll up my drawings, and I go visit Lydia. And I say, that's my island, you can see it from the house, and I want to build this Frank Lloyd Wright house. And her eyes get this big. I said, are you interested? She said, absolutely. I said, can you give me a budget bid? She said, yeah. When? Tomorrow. She gives me, the next day we sit down. She goes through this house for 4 hours, her and I. She knew more about this house than I did. I hired her on the spot. Not only to get her, but I got all her Polish workers. So I put the whole crew game together. This was a fun project. I enjoyed this project.
Yeah, and you're sitting
Once,
in that house today, right?
yeah, I'm right here. I live here. My wife lives over there. I live here. Perfect.
What did your wife think about you buying an island and building a house?
She knows I'm nuts. The things I've done. I feel sorry for that woman married to me. You know, she was in all for it. Yeah, she comes on the tours with us. My wife. That's a
That's
whole nother
great.
story. Tours.
Did you have a passion for architecture before discovering the house and the plans?
Well, when I took that drafting class in school, the drafting teacher was my shop teacher, and he liked me. He said to me, "You're not going to do mechanical drafting. And what I want you to do is, there's a new building that's just got built right across the street. I want you to make a complete set of architectural drawings. Go in there, measure all the rooms, and give me a set of architecture." That was my project for the year, and that's when I really loved drawing. Yeah. But I designed this house, the one that she lives in. I designed it, built a scale model, and built that house. Yeah.
Tell me, do you hope that your kids take over the house at some point, or how do you see your legacy here with this house playing out?
This house will last 1,000 years here. There's no doubt about it. A couple hundred years anyway. I have a time
Yeah.
capsule buried here, you know.
Wow.
And the only way it's ever going to come out is when the house falls down because it's buried underneath it. I have my two daughters are working with me right now on the tours, and my wife. I put a company together with the four of us. Excuse me, I got something to cough. I'm not sure yet. I talked to the girls about it. What do you want to do? I don't see my grandkids jumping in. My granddaughter worked with me one season. Right now we're only working 3 days a week. You know, and this has such a capacity here. It has such a business plan I put together here, and the girls are going to have to make a decision at some point in time. Now, my oldest daughter, she's coming around and enjoying a lot more. My youngest daughter, she lives in Boston. She's doing customer support and all of that stuff, and she's doing a great job. And I mean, the response we get here is unbelievable. We're doubling every year. We're going to do over 2,000 people this year.
Wow.
And that's a whole another freak deal. How that came about too. But I'm going to finish this other thing now. So when I hired Lydia, right, it was end of the season. So she says to me, "Look, I just have enough time to cut a couple of trees down, and we'll start next spring." I said, "Okay." So I'm in Florida, minding my own business. And what comes on television? Ice Road Truckers. Did you ever see it?
No.
In Canada, they drive 18-wheelers over the lakes to get to the oil fields they can't get to in the summer. They're 40,000-pound trucks over the lakes. I got a lake here. So I started doing some research. 2 inches ice hold a car, 4 inches hold a truck, 12 inches ice hold a tank. I called up my marina guy in January. I said, "I need you to do me a favor. Walk to the island." He said, "It's 5 below zero." I said, "I know. That's why I need you to do this. I need to know how thick the ice is." Calls me back, tells me it's 3 foot of ice out there. I said, "Thank you." And I called up Lydia. "What are you doing?" A little paperwork. I said, "I'm flying in Tuesday. Why? We're going to work." "Joe, it's freezing out here." I said, "I know. We're going to start moving stuff over the ice." "You're crazy. Nobody can do that. They'll never let you do that." "I'm going to be there Tuesday. Have 2 gators ready for me and some materials." So I flew in. Everybody's standing around. Nobody's doing anything. I put her on the truck with me. We drive out to the island over the ice and back. Now they know it's safe. For the next 5 weeks, we're moving everything over the ice. Rebar, wood, whatever we could get over that in that 5 week period. Nobody said one word to me. You could see the tracks. It's not like I'm doing it at night, you know. So it was
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah. And it's probably sped up your timeline for everything too, being able to use that.
Yeah, yeah. But only 1 year we could get away with it. The other years it didn't freeze. So we had to move everything by pontoon boat after that. Yeah. But I
You know,
loved it.
Joe, you have a great eye for opportunity.
I
It's
pull the trigger quick. I don't, the problem is I don't think about it. Nothing
mm,
scares me. I don't worry about it. But sometimes I pull it too quick. I did in the 1980 Winter Olympics. I put 100 trailers up there in 10 miles from the downhill skiing, right? I bought $350,000 worth of tickets on 100 brand new trailers. I talked my uncle into it, and we almost went broke. We you know, it's just everything that what could go wrong went wrong, right? So I never forget the night. Everything's ready to go. I got the village built. I got everything ready to go, and we're not getting any sales. You know, we run out of money for advertising. I mean, we're going down the tubes. There's no question about it. And I was there with my cousin and my uncle at the bottom of the stairs in my office. And I said, you know what? I'm not staying here in Peekskill and going broke. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go to Lake Placid. I'm taking the tickets and I'm going to go to Lake Placid. What are you going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do there, but I'm going to do something. So I talked my cousin into coming with me. We went to Winnebago. We drove up to Lake Placid because the guy who got me involved was a friend of mine. He used to be my bartender, and he had connections to get me tickets and everything, and he owned a pizza shop. So I went to him. I said, Mike, can I park behind your building and sell tickets out of my Winnebago? He said, sure, Joe, no problem, whatever you need. Can I put a sign in your window? Yeah. So the next day we sold $2,000 worth of tickets. So I said to my cousin, we need a place on Main Street. We can't sell tickets out of this trailer. He said, these places have been rented for 5 years ahead of the Olympics. You're going to find a place. Let me see you pull that one out of your butt, he says. So it's about 10:30 at night. So I take a walk, and I walk up Main Street, and I know everything's going. I mean, I really know it. I walk down Main Street, and I come by the barber shop, and the barber chairs are still in there, and the product's still on the shelves. And I come down to the pizza shop. It's about 11 o'clock at night. And I say, Michael, you know the guy who owns that barbershop, Norm's barbershop? He said, yeah, he's a friend of mine. I said, get him on the phone. He said, Joe, it's 11 o'clock at night. See if he's awake. Call him. So he calls, he introduced me. I get on the phone. I said, Norm, you're going to cut hair during the Olympics? He said, yep. I said, what do you think you're going to do in business? He said, I think I'm going to do a couple of $1,000. I'll give you $6,000 to rent your place right now. You got a deal. Wait, you got to do two things. You got to take the barber chairs out. You got to take the barber pole down. Okay. Next day he pulls the chairs out, the barber pole down. I call up my shop. I got all the signs on the window. I'm ready to sell tickets. Okay, now the Olympic Committee was supposed to stop selling in August. That's what screwed us up. And they continued. They opened a store right next to me, selling tickets. Well, that next day, a reporter from the Montreal News came in. And I ended up on the front page of the Montreal News. Says, if you need tickets, see Joe at the Clip Joint. I called Norma, put the barber pole back. I did $450,000 in sales out of the barbershop, living on the barbershop floor for 2 weeks.
wow.
And I got all these trailers, right? They all got paper on them. I owe money on every one of them. I got 99 trailers 300 miles away from me. I pay for them all to come back down, and I put them in a building right across the street, a burnt-out building, and I have an auction. The auction starts, I paid $5,500 for each trailer. I started the auction at $6,000, no bids. $5,500, no bids. $5,000, no bids. All the way down to $4,000, no bids. I canceled the auction. They said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go to Plan B. What's that? I don't know yet, but I'll let you know. So what do? I moved 2 trailers up to my parking lot. I put an ad in the paper, 2 trailers from the Olympics. When they come here, they see all these other trailers. What about all them trailers? They're going to Saudi Arabia and a job there. The only 2 I have left. I sold every friggin' trailer that way,
Wow.
2 at a time.
That was a again seeing opportunity in the face of an obstacle.
Yeah,
I
I love,
wonder if
love obstacles.
what's that?
I love obstacles.
What do you think has been your biggest obstacle in life?
So, being me, being me. So I, when I went, when I decided to do this project, I went to, I contacted the foundation, right? If I'm gonna build the house, I want the foundation to do it. I want to know whatever drawings they have. This is the only drawing they have of the whole house, a 9.5 by 11. That's it. So I had to go to a meeting in Arizona. I was on the labor relations board for the union. In other words, settling contracts across the whole United States. It was a 4-year term. They had me on for 11 years. I was a star negotiator. I could negotiate any put contracts together. So that it was just fun. So I had to go to Arizona to a meeting, and I said to my wife, call up the foundation, tell them we're coming to Arizona. I want to see them about building the house. You know, I want the foundation to build it. If I'm going to build this house, I want the foundation to be. It's going to be a Frank Lloyd Wright house. So when I got home, I said, what happened? They said, they can't meet with you. What do you mean they can't meet with me? I'm a client. We're not going to be there for 2 weeks. So that's what they said. So 2 weeks go by. I roll up my drawings. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking my drawings. I got a meeting with the foundation. She said, you don't have a meeting with the foundation. I said, Barbara, I have a meeting with the foundation. They just don't know it yet, you know. So I went there. I went into the gift shop, and they said, well, you like a tour? I said, no. I rolled out the drawings. I want to talk to somebody about this house. So they send one guy down. The first thing he says to me, you can't build that house. Why can't I build this house? He said, you're going to block the view of your neighbors. I said, I'm not blocking the view of anybody. It's on an island. He says, yeah, what about the people, the other people on the island? I said, I own the whole island. Now I got 5 architects down there talking to me, right? So we go through, and I end up buying 3 renderings of this house in full color that I'm going to show to the town board when I go to the meeting. So I get this letter after the meeting. Basically, it says, the ability to build one of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings on the site for which he designed it has become extremely rare. The capability to execute this dramatic house he designed for Mr. and Mrs. Schrudy in the late 1949s on the exact site on Petra Island in Lake Mayapack, Carmel, New York, presents an unusual and special opportunity. I hope that you go forward. So I got the foundation behind me, right? So when I got the renderings from them, I said, now I want a price. What do you want to do this project? You have to remember the drawings are done. The main drawings are done. Basically, it's an overview that I'm going to get from them, right? Almost 3 weeks before I get a price from them, the guy calls me up that I was dealing with. He says, Joe, you got to sit down. I help you. He says, I'm embarrassed to give you this number. What's the number? They want $450,000 to do the drawings. I said, that's ridiculous. It'd be worth about $100,000. He said, I know, but that's not all. What else? He said, any detail they put on the drawing, no matter how much it costs, you have to do. And the third thing is you can't build the house without them. They own the copyright. Oh, yeah, here we go, right? Not going to be as easy as I thought. Okay. So I gave us some thought. I said, it's going to cost me $100,000 to hire another architect, and it's going to cost me $100,000 to fight them for their copyright. So I went back and offered them $200,000. They didn't answer me, but what they did do is send a letter to the town telling the town, do not approve this project. We own the copyright, we'll sue the town. Now I'm pissed, you know. So I gotta hire a lawyer. I'm gonna fight these guys. So I'm on the island one day, and who shows up here with a friend of mine, his wife, his daughter, and her boyfriend, who happens to be a music copyright lawyer. So I started talking to him about this, and his hobby is architecture copyright, right? Lucky. So after we finished, he said, you can beat him. I said, you're hired. I didn't check him. You're hired. He said, wait, you can't hire me that quick. I said, why? He said, because you can't sue him for just your copyright. If you sue him for just your copyright, they're going to keep you in court for years. What's your answer? He said, it's radical. I love radical. What's radical? Sue him for all the copyrights. I said, I'm in. He said, you're kidding. No. We sued the foundation for all the copyrights. Now I have their attention, right? So we're going through. They try to move the court date out of New York to Arizona, and the judge says, where's the house in New York? No, the case stays here. So my lawyer calls me up and says to me, look, they want to talk to you one more time before we got to go into court. He says, don't go for more than $50,000, because that's what it's going to cost to fight him in court. I said, okay. So I call the guy up, I have a nice conversation with the guy, and I said to him, I don't know what's the matter with you guys. You missed an opportunity here. You haven't built a house on the piece of property that's designed for 50 years. It would have put you on the map. The guy said, yeah, I know, my people were pretty stupid. I said, they were very stupid. So I called my lawyer up. He said, how'd you make out? I said, pretty good. He said, how much it cost? I said, nothing. He said, how could it be nothing? I said to the foundation, I'll leave your copyrights alone. You leave my copyright alone. And what it ended up being is they said, well, all you can say it's inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. And like I tell everybody, Frank Lloyd Wright inspired me to build this masterpiece, and that's what I did.
Hmm.
It's just
Wow.
on and on. There's always an obstacle. So during the Olympics, right? Now, during the Olympics, I've got permission to build this village there. So I've got everything ready. I put in 100 brand new water sites for the plumbers and everything. And the Adirondack Park, we go to the final meeting to get our final CO, and the fire department comes in and says, we can't get our fire trucks in there. And the guy from the Adirondack Park agent says, you can't cut another tree. I got permission. You can't cut. You're done. You're done. My lawyer says to me, we've been through many meetings where he said to me, okay, what do you want to do? I said, I go to Plan B. What plan? I'll tell you tomorrow. Plan C. Now, at that meeting, he turns to me, he said, Joe, you got it a long way, but it looks like we're done now. I said, we're going to go to Plan ZZ. He said, what Plan ZZ? I said, I'll tell you tomorrow. So I called up my office and I said to my shop foreman, I want 3 guys up here tonight with chainsaws. Right? They come up that night. We cut the trees. There was only a couple of trees. I had the right to cut the trees. This guy was just breaking my chops, right? I cut the trees down to the dirt line and painted them black. And I called the fire department the next day. Can you bring the truck in from the other side? And sure enough, the truck could fit. I got my CO.
You've accomplished a lot and overcome a lot of obstacles. I wonder what you think is the biggest heirloom you leave behind.
This house is it. There's no question about it. This thing is, I mean, I laugh at how I got away with this. I mean, it's a 44-acre island right next to me. They don't let them build anything on it. Nothing. This is a piece of art out here. It really is. That's a whole nother story how I ended up doing tours. Whole nother story. I was happy here. I spend my summers here, right? My winters in Florida, my summers here. I had a friend staying with me. The guy that helped me put my paperwork together to sell my company. I happened to hear that Falling Waters gets 140,000 visitors a year. And I said to Frank, my house is nicer than Falling Waters. I want to do a proof of concept on a business idea I have. I want to start a tour company, take people out to the island. And that's how we started.
Wow.
And my brother works up with me. I told you he's a genius, right? So he's working up on stuff he's talking about all of these different formulas. This is a polynomial math formula that he uses, okay? And what this does is it tracks how the word of mouth spreads, okay? It's a curve. Here's his prediction. So we did 550 in the first year, 700 the second, 1,000, and we're predicting 2,500 this year, 4,300 the next year, and 8,900 the third year. And these numbers are falling into place. So I have one or two things to do here. One is to put this together like a business. You can't sell the island. The person who buys this island it's just a toy for them, okay? You can't really sell it to a family. It's not logical. You're not going to get up in the morning and go get milk. It's not a place that you can live comfortably. I mean, the house is magnificent. It's air conditioned. It's got everything you want. But it's inconvenient to get out here. Rain, all sorts of. So I've been working with a realtor a couple of times, and we're going to sell this with a business. It's going to be sold with a business. I don't want to sell all of it. I want to keep some of it into the family, It's an amazing business. They come in for an hour and a half. I put them on a boat, take them out here. I put a new hologram in with Frank Lloyd Wright in there, and I tell the story in the hologram, and they're just thrilled. They're just thrilled. It's amazing.
Joe, in 50 years, when people are telling your story, what do you hope that they say about you?
That crazy guy built that house. That's going to be, they all know,
Yeah.
Crazy Joe. I'm at the marina one day with my wave runner, right? And the guy next to me is cleaning his boat, and the owner comes out and he's talking to the guy, and the guy says, "You know that crazy guy's going to build that house on it?" He said, "Why don't you ask him? He's sitting right next to you, you know."
Anything that you would want left out of your story when people tell it years from now?
No, this is what's in the back of my book. I'm just going to read this to you.
Oh,
What's wrong with you? This is a question I heard throughout my life, from the Catholic school nuns I spent 10 years of my early education with, to the CEOs of industry leading businessmen. I was used to the question, but I wasn't offended by it. I just figured there was a lot wrong with me. I never passed a year of school until the 11th grade, when I discovered I was good at building. Looking back, it's pretty clear I had a learning disability, but with no diagnosis back then, I was on my own to figure out how to manage what was wrong with me. Thinking outside the box wasn't really an option because I have no box. Instead, I created a successful method of trying and trying and trying again. I learned that if I try enough stupid, crazy, what's wrong with you kind of stuff, eventually something would work. And it tells basically the story I told you, with, with a couple of other stories in there, different jobs and different methods and stuff.
and that's available online.
Yeah, it's available by book. It's also available by audio too.
Wonder, you've accomplished a lot, even though you say you have a disability and you struggled in school. I wonder, what do you think the difference is between dreamers and doers?
Doing,
Just doing.
just doing. Yeah,
Mm.
it's like this old age, growing old. Like the new theory here is keep the old guy out. I'm 80 years old. Like not too many people can keep up with me. Yeah.
What do you think the difference is between wealth and legacy?
The difference, I think one is a measure of the other. I think wealth is a measure of how you did. And legacy is what you produce from that wealth.
Yeah. And you think your legacy will be the house on Petra Island?
It will be the people say that we like your story more than the house, and we love the house. I changed the way things are done on a tour. There's no ropes up here. There's no rooms that you can't go into. You get to sit on furniture. It's a whole different experience. They said it's not like going to a tour. It's like going to a friend's house. You know?
So it's more of an experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a few questions for you so the audience can get to know you a little bit better. A place that feels like home.
This island.
One word your family would use to describe you.
Crazy.
A habit that has changed your life.
Learning patience.
What's one thing you think people often get wrong about success?
They don't know they have it sometimes.
If you could have dinner with anyone from history, who would it be?
Frank Lloyd Wright.
I've heard you describe how success was sometimes out of your control, that you just kept getting the green light, so you kept going. What do you think that was, that outside force?
It's an inside voice. I can't hear no. I don't hear no.
Well, Joe, I have loved listening to your story and talking to you today. Thank you for coming on and sharing it with us.
My pleasure.